Okay. That's just a Mishna.
All right. I think I have Chagiga first.
Yeah, Chagiga based salad.
Okay. Based on it. Well, thank you for talking to your wife. I appreciate
Hmm.
any input.
Sure.
And Shavuos falls on the eve of Shabbos. Beit Shammai says the day of slaughter is after the Sabbath. Beit Hillel says there is no day of slaughter after the Sabbath. They concur that if it fell on the Sabbath, the day of slaughter is after the Sabbath. Sorry, I just can't help this. The
No
Kohen
way.
Gadol does not don his special garments on that day. Moreover, they're permitted to utilize and fast in order not to confirm the view of those who say that Shavuos is always the day after Shabbos. We must wash the hands for unsanctified food, for Maisa, for Truma, for Kodesh, we must immerse the hands. Regarding the water of cleansing, if one's hands become contaminated, his entire body is considered contaminated. If one immersed himself for unsanctified food and only intended to clean himself for unsanctified food, he is prohibited from eating Maisa. If he immersed himself for Maisa and only intended to cleanse himself for Maisa, he is prohibited from eating Truma. If he immersed himself for Truma and only intended to cleanse himself of Truma, he is prohibited from eating Kodesh. If he immersed himself for Kodesh and only intended to cleanse himself for Kodesh, he is prohibited from touching water of cleansing. If he immersed himself, if he immersed himself for a more stringent matter, he is permitted to occupy himself with a less stringent matter. If he had immersed himself without any intention, he is deemed as if he had not immersed himself.
Okay. Okay, having a bit of a coughing fit there.
I have one more. One more.
No, no, no. This is me now.
Oh, good. I
Okay.
can rest.
Yeah, exactly. Um, all right. So we're dealing with all rules of Tuma and Tara now that we're dealing with Chagiga, and because Chagiga is Kodshim that people eat when they come to Yerushalayim, um, and um, similarly, just like when you're doing the Tuma and Tara, the Tevila for your kavana matters. What do you? It's the same physical action. You're getting into the mikveh, but what are you preparing for? And that matters to what you're allowed to do. You can't total for maaser and then decide you're going to eat truma. Okay. Big day am haaretz midras leproshim. So also the clothing of an am haaretz are considered midras for people who are careful. Prussian, yeah, the people that so just on the simplest level, if you see somebody who doesn't really know halacha and you accidentally stand on his cloak, that's a midras. So midras tuma immediately you become tame because he is assumed to not be careful about tuma and tara, and that makes you tame immediately. Okay, big day Prussian. But even the clothes of people who are careful about tuma and tara are midras le'ochle truma. So in other words, a Kohen who wanted to eat truma steps on the robe of let's take any given god. Let's say Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who like so they stand on the robe of Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Whoops! Immediately they become tame as far as truma is concerned. Big day ochle truma. So meanwhile, you've got a Kohen who's toiveled himself for truma and he's about to eat truma and somebody else who's ole regel and was preparing to eat from his chagiga, let's say, accidentally stands on the Kohen's cloak. Boom, he's tame. Midras the kodesh. Big day kodesh midras the chatas, and the same thing goes with somebody even he's prepared himself for kodesh, and somebody else was preparing himself for dealing with the water of the paraduma. That's he becomes tame. And to illustrate this point, we say Yossi ben Yoezer Haya Chassid Sheba Kahuna. He was one of the greatest Kohanim. He was the most Chassid. He was the most careful about halacha. Vaysa mitpachto midras lekodesh, and even his cloak was a midras for people who wanted to eat kodesh. Okay, Yochanan ben Gudgada Haya Ochel al Taras Hakodesh Kol Yamav. Yochanan, so he was a guy who always ate even his chulin meals he prepared himself and ate as if he was eating truma all of the time. And his uh, clothing was never mind it was Taras Kodesh. He ate it as if it was Kodesh all of his life. But even so, if somebody had prepared himself for preparing the Meichatas, then it will be he would be Tameh. Okay. So nothing personal, that's just the rules.
Right.
Okay, chomer b'kodesh mi b'truma. So there are several chumras of kodesh over truma. What are they? Matbilin kalim b'toch kalim l'truma aval lo l'kodesh. So if your kalim became tame and you want to eat truma in your kalim, so you can stack a few of them into each other loosely. They can't be tight. But if they're loose and the water will get in between them, you can stack them all together and stick them in one shot, and that makes it a little easier. And so you don't have to have several movements to put them all in. Aval lo l'kodesh, you can't do that for kodesh. Kodesh, you have to immerse each kli separately. Achoraim b'toch ubeis hatzvisa b'truma. So as we've learned in Kalim, and we haven't reached it yet in our Chazaras, but there's the part where you grip and the rest of the kli are considered almost separate places that can become tame, that the grip can become tame without the rest of the kli becoming tame. Okay, but that only applies to things up to the level of truma. Aval lo b'kodesh. If you want to use that for kodesh, it's not acceptable. If it can go to mikveh, you put it in the mikveh, and if it's kli cheres, you're just not allowed to use it for kodesh. Hanose es hamidras. What happens if somebody carries a midras, something that's tame midras? No say es a truma. He can also, in his other hand, carry let's say a kli cheres with truma on the inside, because the truma doesn't get transmitted through the walls of the kli cheres. A kli cheres doesn't get tame from the outside; it only gets from the inside. So he could be holding a midras and carrying the truma in one hand, and that's fine. Aval lo is a kodesh. You can't do that with kodesh. Big day ochle truma midras the kodesh, and we just saw in the previous Mishnah that the clothing of somebody who's tahor for truma is nonetheless tame for kodesh. Lo kamidas a kodesh midas a truma. And what else is different about Kodesh from Truma Shiva? Kodesh matir umina gave umat bil v'achakach kosher. So let's say he's got his clothing tied up in to keep it compact or clean. I think to keep it compact. Um, that he has that in order to tovel clothing, let's say that's become tameh for Kodesh, he has to untie it completely and dry it, and then he has to tovel it, and afterwards he can tie it again. But with truma, if he just wants to tovel it for truma, kosher v'achar kach matbil. He can tie it loosely, not so that the water can get into everywhere. If you tie it so tightly that the water can't get in, that's called a chatzitza. But if it's just
Right.
a loose knot, he can tovel that as it is for truma.
Okay.
Okay. Kalim hanigmarim b'tara. What happens if a kli was completed b'tara? Okay, just stam. He made sure that the artisan made sure that when he finished the kli, he was tahor, and therefore the kli is for sure tahor. Nonetheless, tzrichin tvila lekodesh. Nonetheless, it still has to go to the mikveh. This is talking obviously about a kli that can go to the mikveh. Okay,
Uh,
kli cheres cannot go to the mikveh. Aval lo truma. You don't need that for truma. Hakli mitzaref mashi b'socha lekodesh. Um, aval lo truma. So if you have so the kli joins together for the minimum quantity. So let's say there was a very small quantity of uh, so, um, let's say lots of little pieces of food, and something tame touched one of these little pieces. So if you're talking about truma, then you don't care, because if anything that's less than a kibetza cannot accept truma. But if we're talking about kodesh, then you look at all of the pieces that are inside the kli and you say, okay, do they add up to a kibetza? And if they add up to a kibetza, then everything becomes tame as kodesh is concerned. Haravi ba Kodesh Pasul. The Tuma goes down 4 degrees for Kodesh, ba Shlishi ba Truma, but only 3 degrees for Truma. over truma im nitmes achas miyadav chaveret tahora. So if a person is eating and he accidentally touches something with his hand, that is something. By the way, we're not talking about something that'll make his body tame. We're talking about, let's say he touches a tame liquid. Okay, that a tame liquid doesn't make the rest of your body tame. It just makes your hands tame. So one hand becomes tame, the other hand remains tahor. With kodesh matbil shtehen, he has to go back and put both of them into the mikveh. Okay. Remember, for truma, you can do natilas yadayim, and that's why we do natilas yadayim for
Right.
bread. You just take a kli, wash over your hands, and your hands are tahor. But for kodesh, your hands have to go into the mikveh, and not only that, shayad mitame es chaveret v'kodesh aval lo b'truma. Um, if one hand can make his can make it its other will automatically transmit tumah to the other hand as far as kodesh is concerned, but there's no such thing by truma. Okay,
Moed cotton base.
let's hey.
Hey, I was close. Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Base here. We must cover drying pigs with straw. Rabbi Huda says we may even stack them. Vendors of fruit, clothing, and utensils may sell their wares in private, but for use during the festival. Tappers, cereal makers, and bean pounders may ply their trade in private for festival needs. Rabbi Yossi says they impose this stringency upon themselves. These people may cut their hair during Kol HaMoed. One who arrived from abroad, was released from captivity, left prison, or excommunicate, whose ban was listed by the Chachamim. Um, Similarly, one who applied to a sage and has been released from his vow, the Nazir or the Mitzvah, who returned from a state of contamination to a state of purity. And those people may launder their clothing during Kol HaMoed. One who arrived from abroad, one was released from captivity, left prison, or the excommunication whose ban was lifted by sages. Similarly, the one who applied to a sage and was released from his vow. Hand towels, barber's clothes, and bath towels may also be laundered. Zavim, Zavos, menstruates, women who have given birth, and all who have returned from a state of contamination to a state of purity. These are permitted to launder their clothing, but all others are forbidden.
Okay,
Okay, okay, and we are on to
Rosh Hashanah.
this should be Dalet Aleph.
Very good.
And the sages, when Rosh Hashanah festival fell on Sabbath, they would blow the shofar in the temple, but not in the province. After the temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that they blow the shofar in every place where there is a bezdin. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said, Rabbanan Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted this regulation for Yavna only, and they said to him, Yavna and other place where there has been a bezdin. Originally, the lulav was taken in the temple all 7 days of Sukkot, and I skipped something. In this matter, too, Yerushalayim was superior to Yavna, and that any town which could see Yerushalayim and could hear and is near to Yerushalayim and can come to Yerushalayim on Sabbath may blow the shofar on Sabbath. Then Yavna they may blow only before the Bezdin. Originally, the lulav was taken in the temple all 7 days of Sukkot, and the province of lulav was taken only 1 day. After the temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that lulav be taken in the province for 7 days in remembrance of the temple, and the entire day of waving the omer should be forbidden. Okay.
Psachim. Zayin Vav.
Fucking okay. Zion Vav. If the community or its majority became contaminated, or if the Kohanim were contaminated, but the community was uncontaminated, it may be performed the contamination. If a minority of the community became contaminated, those uncontaminated observe the first Pesach offering, and the contaminated observe the second Pesach offering. Any Pesach offering whose blood has been thrown and was learned afterwards that it had been contaminated, the tzitz affect acceptance. But if the body of the person was contaminated, then the tzitz does not affect acceptance. For they have said, concerning the Nazarite and the one who performs the service of the Pesach, the tzitz affects acceptance concerning contamination of the blood, but the tzitz does not affect acceptance for the contamination of the body. If one became contaminated from a contamination of the deep, the tzitz affects acceptance. If the whole or the greater part of the whole, a part of it became contaminated, it must be burned before the temple complex, and with wood or the pyre. If the lesser part became contaminated, also the leftover sacrificial meat, they burned it in the courtyards or on their rooftops with their own wood. The misers burned it before the temple complex in order to benefit from the wood of the pyre.
Yeah.
Okay. Elayim. Elayim should be Zion Aleph.
Correct.
If one sinks a vine into the ground, if there is not a 3 handbreadths of soil above it, he may not bring seeds on it, even if he sunk it into a gourd or into a pipe. If he sunk it into a rock, then even if there is only 1 finger's breadth of soil above it, he is permitted to bring seeds on it. The knee of the vine is measured from the second root. If one depresses the 3 vines and the roots are visible, Reb Eliezer ben Tzadok says if there are 4 to 8 cubits between them, they combine, but if not, they do not combine. A withered vine is forbidden, but does not render forbidden. Rebbe Meir says cotton is also forbidden, but does not render forbidden. Rebbe Elazar ben Tzadok says in his name, also above the vine is forbidden, yet it does not render forbidden. The following forbid, but do not render forbidden. The remainder of a vineyard lay waste, the remainder of a machal of a vineyard, the remainder of a gaps and arras, the remainder of a trellis frames, but beneath a vine, till its base of vine, and the 4 cubits in a vineyard, who render forbidden. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, we are on to Caleb. Caleb, I should have Yud Daled, Yud Zion, Yud Daled. There are some items
Yud
that were
Zayin.
created. I'm sorry?
Yud Zayin, Yud Zayin. The base of Smiths. We missed yesterday, so that's why you're a little bit out of sync.
The base of Smiths is Tameh, but that of the blacksmith is Tahor. The sharpening board that has been a receptacle for beholding oil is Tameh, and the sharpening board that does not have a receptacle is Tahor. A ledger that has a receptacle for holding wax is Tameh, and a ledger that does not have a receptacle is Tahor. Regarding a straw mat or a straw tube, Rebbe Kiva was a Tameh, but Rebbe Yochanan ben Nori was a Tahor. Reb Shimon says the same applies to Kolev, a mat of reeds that of said of Tahor. A reed tube that was cut for the purpose of being used as receptacle is Tahor until one removes all of its bit. Regarding a bin, Beit Shammai says it is measured from its interior, but Beis Hillel said it is measured from its exterior. Both agree that the thickness of the legs and the thickness of the rims are not measured. Rabbi Yossi says they agree that the thickness of the legs, the thickness of the rims are not measured, but the area between the legs is not measured. Rabbi Shimon's story says that the legs were 1 handbreadth high and the area between them is not measured, but if not, the area between them is measured. Regarding its wheel, and when it is removable, it is not considered connected to the bin. It is not measured together with the bin. It does not protect against tuma together with the bin when there are an ohel over a corpse, and we may not drag it over the Sabbath, and when there is money inside it. But if the wheel is not removable, it is considered connected to the bin. It is measured together with the bin. It protects against tuma again together with the bin when they are an ohel over a corpse, and we may drag it if it is measured by drawing or the diagonal line. Rabbi
Oh,
Yehuda says
you skipped a page. Yeah.
on the Sabbath, even though there's money inside it. Regarding its cover, when there is permanent yet set, it is considered connected to the bin and is measured together with the bin. But if it is not permanently set, it is not considered connected to the bin and is not measured together with the bin. However, I skip something again.
No.
Oh, how is it measured? By drawing a diagonal line. But Judah says the bin cannot stand by itself. It is tahor. Okay. All
Okay.
right. That's that.
And finally, Sanhedrin.
Okay. This should be Chedvav. Am I right?
We're in test base
How did that happen?
because we missed yesterday.
Test based. One who aimed to kill an animal killed a human, or aimed an animal at or aimed to kill a Gentile but killed a Jew, or aimed to kill a premature baby but killed a viable one is exempt. If he aimed to strike on his loins and the force of the blow was not sufficient to kill at that spot, but it struck his chest where his force was sufficient to kill and it died, he is exempt. If he aimed to strike him on his chest and the blow contained sufficient force to kill at that spot, but it struck his loins where its force was insufficient to kill and he died, he is exempt. If he aimed to strike an adult and the force was not sufficient to kill an adult, but he struck a child whom it was sufficient to kill and he died, it is exempt. If he aimed to strike a child and the force was sufficient to kill a child, but he struck an adult whom it is not sufficient to kill and he died, he is exempt. However, if he aimed to strike him on his loins and the force was sufficient to kill him on that spot, but he struck his chest and he died, he is liable. If he aimed to strike an adult and the force was sufficient to kill an adult, Anybody struck a child and he died, he is liable. Reb Shimon says even if he aimed to kill this one and he killed that one, he is exempt. If a murderer's identity was lost in a group, they are all exempt. Reb Yehuda says we place them in a cell. Anytime people sentenced to execution become confused with one another, they are subject to the most lenient one. If they are sentenced to be stoned because they became confused with the sentence to be burned, Reb Shimon said they are all executed by stoning, as burning is more severe. But the comments say they are executed by burning, as stoning is more severe. Said Reb Shimon to them, if burning was not more severe, it would not have been meted out to the daughter of a Kohen who commits adultery. They said to him, if stoning were not more severe, they would not have been meted out to the blasphemer and the idolater. And if those to be beheaded became confused with those to be strangled, Reb Shimon says they are executed by beheading, and the comments say by strangulation. One who became liable to form forms of execution is subject to more severe form. He has committed a transgression which is punishable by forms of execution. He is subjected to the more severe one. Rabbi Yoshi says he is subjected to the one by which he was first enjoyed. Okay.
Okay, that's
All
it.
right. All right.
And
Have a great day.
you
Thank you.
too. Feel good.
Thank you. I hope to see you tomorrow.